What's up, guys? This is Justin from the Board Game Losers, and today I have a review for you of Dungeon Crusade. This is a game that we just finished playing on the channel by Grievous Games Unlimited. It's called Dungeon Crusade Book 1, A Genesis of Evil. I think it is safe to say it is the most episodes or videos that I've done in a series. So I wanted to give you my thoughts on the game after playing it all the way through. In the past, I have played this through a little bit, not all the way through, but part of the way through a couple times, and obviously watched a lot of other playthroughs or parts of playthroughs. I've never seen an entire playthrough from start to finish, but that's what I wanted to do before I reviewed it. So I just want to give you, first thing I want to give you is an overview of the game and kind of what it's about. So Dungeon Crusade is, at its heart, a dungeon crawl, a very, very big dungeon crawl. You're going to play for 1 to 6 heroes, depending on which mode you play in. There is a solo mode, which is solo mode in that you have fewer characters, but really it's basically 1 to 6 heroes, depending on how you play. You have quest tables, kind of objectives that you're trying to complete, that you're working towards. You can work towards all of them at the same time, but once you complete the first set, you're going to go back to town, and that's where you're going to get some rewards. You're going to be able to spend your money, spend your life force, which is basically like XP, and you're going to be able to take all that and level up your characters and then go back into the dungeon. There's some elements of the dungeon that reset, some things that don't, and when you go back into the dungeon, it's going to be some more difficult minions, which are kind of like the roaming monsters that are in the dungeon, and then you're going to have to complete this new quest table, which can be a myriad of things. It may be going to certain rooms, it may be slaying certain monsters. There's keys involved. This has traps. It's got locked rooms. It's got finding specific items randomly in dungeons, and then going and taking those to other parts of the dungeons. It's really got a lot going for it. This is a passion project by Roger Deering, who is behind Grievous Games Unlimited, who basically really is Grievous Games Unlimited. And it took a while for it to get here. It was a Kickstarter that took a very long time to get here. I think 2 to 3 years, something like that. As far as like once the Kickstarter ended, before it was fulfilled, maybe longer, I can't remember, but it was quite a while. I believe it's the one that has taken the longest in my collection, but it did finally make it. There is a reprint going on right now at the time of this filming, and so I'm excited about that. Some things were updated, and some of the cards and stuff like that were updated, but the box was made a little bit bigger. A couple aesthetic things, essentially. And really, it was just a way for people to get a copy, because there weren't a lot of extra copies of the game. So, super excited about that. There is a Facebook community, and Roger is very active in that. It's a fan-driven community. There's a lot of people that are very active in that. So, that's very awesome. Questions that I had about the game, I could post rules questions. Roger would answer. Other members of that community would answer. And so, that was very helpful when I played. I need to go back. I meant to do this before I started filming. I need to go back and figure out how many hours I have. As a matter of fact, yeah, that's how many hours it was that I took to do this playthrough, and that's just playable hours, right? That's like literally playtime. So I'm gonna go through a list. I don't really have a specific order, but after I finished the game, I took a couple weeks and I just kind of let myself think about what all was going on and what my pros and my cons were. And so I've got a list. I do have a cheat sheet right here because I want to make sure I get it all out there. This is going to be, like I said, this is my review. Obviously, with a review, this is just my perspective. I'm sure there's somebody out there that has a different perspective than me. So keep that in mind. This was my experience. This may not be your experience, but if you like the same kind of games I do, if you like the same kind of things that I do, I would say this would be a fair assessment of whether this is right for you, or if this is maybe something that you don't want in your warehouse. So I'm going to start with a pro, and I've got kind of three things that are linked but not exactly the same. I've got pro, lore, art, text, and abilities. And in those I'm talking about the theme. This game is extremely thematic. One of the things that Roger was very specific about, because he basically wrote, he didn't do a lot of the art necessarily. He did the graphic design on a lot of things, but he didn't do the art. And he if you listen to him, he credits the artist, which I think is awesome, for all the artwork that are in there, that is in there. But the theme is there, the lore. If you read there's kind of two games in Dungeon Crusade. So there's like the first part, which is called the Avalon Adventure board game, and it's kind of like a overview, a big world overview, where you're going through and you're looking for these runes, and you're trying to find these runes, and then once you do that, oh, it's my dog. Once you, as Rob Warren says, the most unprofessional channel. Once you find those, then that journey will give you gold. It will give you gear, things like that, potentially items, right? Weapons, that sort of thing. And then when you start the quest scenario that you choose, so there's a book that has scenarios and it tells you which quest tables are there. You start with that instead of like rolling or picking like a kind of like a default level, depending on how easy or hard you want it to be, and just get a bunch of gold. So that theme, all those are huge stories. All of the all of the items have very they all have like some text that talks about the story behind it, whether it's fabled gear, which is linked to your heroes. The encounter cards are very thematic, as far as it doesn't just say like mechanically what you do. It tells you the mechanics, but it tells you in a way that's story based, very thematic, and it describes it in a thematic way. The quests, right? So there's two sides to the quest card. There's one side that's kind of like the details on how to seed the dungeons. It's extremely random, which I'll talk about later. But it shows you how to do that. But on the other side, I mean, it is a wall of text that is very detailed about why that quest is going on, who wants to do it, why they want to do it, what you want. So theme is just all over the place for the lore. The art, it is very much fantasy based, and it's consistent, right? So what I mean by that is it's not just the art of the creatures, like it matches the art on the board and the backgrounds and stuff of the cards. It's all that same kind of 80s, I would call it like 80s painted art. It makes me think of like growing up, that old like D&D look, right? Which is what he was going for. Like I said, the text is very thematic, and abilities. So each class, each person is a different class. You got paladins, mages, knights, rogues, etc., etc. They all have three abilities, and those abilities, there's three levels to each ability. They have three abilities, and they're all very thematic as far as like what they do based on their class. So I was really, really excited about that. It felt, when I was playing, I felt like I was definitely, with all the stats, with the warfare values and the other things in the game that are used to create the character mechanically, they all felt like they matched in terms of theme. Another pro is variety. This thing has so much variety, it's ridiculous. So in the scenario book, which I have right here, so this is the scenario book, right? And you're going to see when you open the scenario book, each page has a ton of variety. So you can set this up based on a specific level. So if you wanted to play normal, it'll tell you how to set all the different difficulty levels, terror level, guardian spawn track, how many guardians you have to beat, all the items, which there's a bunch of items, all the potions, all that sort of stuff, how to set that up. or you can just roll a d6 and have it be totally random for every single one of those things, and just see what happens. It's insane. So there's plenty of variety there. Also, with the quest tables, you have two. You have a main quest, a side quest, and then kill the guardians, which are these harder bosses that you have for every quest table. So, or kind of chapter, and it's really nice because with all those quests, it's going to make you traverse the entirety of the map, right? It's not like there's this one section where you do everything in, and then the other part of the map is just kind of there. That happens in another quest. The way he's got the quest set up is you're going, there's a set of rooms on the left side of the map that you need to go to, and the right side, or maybe the keys on the left side of the map in some room, and then the right side is where the doors have to be open once you get the key to do something. So you're not just wasting a lot of the map. You're going all over the place with the map, which I did appreciate, because sometimes you feel like, why did I set all that other up right when I'm not even going to it? That is definitely not the case here. Another pro, warfare rolls and gear. So the way the mechanics work is, if you haven't played it, the way the mechanics work is you have 6 warfare types. All the enemies have them, you have them, and you have kind of like a base stat, and then you roll a d6 and a d12 against some target number, and that's whether you determine whether you hit or not. And then you do, depending on your weapon, you'll do, some amount of damage, and that's how the warfare works. But it's really neat because you only have a limited number of slots for items, right? So you kind of have to make a choice. You can take somebody, if you're playing like solo, you can take a couple people and 2 or 3 people, and you can make them all really good at a couple of stats, and kind of like strategically manage them so that they're fighting the monsters as best you can. Because some monsters, some rooms you go into, chamber rooms, you don't know what's in there. But if you do know what's in there, you can kind of like strategically do that, or you could do party building, which is a big part of the game, and one of the main things Roger wanted to do with the original game especially is party building, where if I've got, say, 3 heroes, or in solo mode, a hero and 2 mercenaries, which is the equivalent of 3 heroes, I can have like each hero really good at a couple of things, and then I can rally them in certain situations, depending on which kind of, again, the classic mode or the solo crusader mode. I can rally them, and then I've got like their stats to use in the combat. So I really like that kind of like dynamic where you had to choose: do I make somebody really strong in a couple things, or do I make them kind of more utilitarian and good, a little bit excel in everything, so that I have a chance regardless of what I fight, as opposed to, especially if I'm going into a room I don't know anything about, walking into that room and it's like, well, crap, they don't have any of the stats that I'm really good at, so this is going to be a tough fight, and I've got to run. And there are consequences for running, right? So you can't just walk in and then run out. There are consequences. That was a huge pro. What's up, guys? This is Justin. It's going to seem a little bit odd in the middle of this video, maybe towards the end. I'm not sure where I'm going to put this. I look a little bit different than I have for the rest of the video. Why is that? Well, let me give you the backstory. You can see on the screen, I have a picture of the rulebook. So this section of the video, when I made this review originally, it's been a while. It was right after we completed the playthrough. And I made the video review of the game, and I sent it to Roger Deering. And there's a lot of things that I love about the game, as you have seen. But the rulebook was not one of them, right? So I sent the video in its totality to Roger to let him review it, give him a chance to give some feedback, because I think that's just the right, fair thing to do. So Roger gave some feedback, talked about kind of the concerns that I had with the original rulebook, but he did say that they were working on the revised rulebook, and he asked me if I would wait until it came out to really review that rulebook and give it a fair shot, right? Because this revised rulebook, he said, was going to change significantly really from the original rule book. So I agreed to do that. So he sent me, at least at the time of this recording, it hasn't been released public. He did send me the final rule book, the revised rule book, and I've reviewed it. So that's what I want to talk to you about now. And so, what do I think about the rule book? Well, the original rule book, I had a ton of issues with. I won't go into all the issues, but let's just say that I was not a fan of the original rule book. Like, really not a fan. Great game. Love the game. Would play the game again. Gonna get all the books. Don't have a problem with the game. I think it's amazing. Super, super enjoyed the playthrough. It's pretty long, but I enjoyed it. The rule book, I did not enjoy at all. It was tough. So this revised rule book, I'll say this: it is so much better. I think this is a good rule book now. It's still 40 pages as opposed to the 60 or 70 that was out there. But this rule book is much more streamlined. It's a lot more to the point. It's got a lot of things going for it as far as there's not a lot of extra fluff. It's giving you what you need, what you have to play, and I appreciate that. That is so much better. So what I want to do is kind of Roger sent, based on what I had talked to him about and what he kind of envisioned in the new rule book, some of the things that have changed from the original. So I want to go over those specific differences, but I just want to say on the topic of the rule book, which is what this kind of section of my review is about, that the rule book is now a pretty good rule book. It's not perfect. There's some things that I still probably would have changed, but in comparison, it is light years ahead, and it's a rule book that I think that somebody that gets the game, keeping in mind that I wouldn't consider this a gateway game, just from the stance of if you got it for yourself and you've not played a lot of other games, even the new rule book is going to be quite a challenge because it is fairly long and there are a lot of little things going on. But this game is not mechanically hard. And once you get through a couple turns, and pretty much once you fight the minions once, and once you do lockpicking once you kind of do everything one time, you're like, oh, this isn't nearly as difficult as I thought it was. That it feels like when you first set it up and you just have all this stuff on the table. So let's talk about that. So what I've done is I'm going to keep looking down. I've got some notes here in front of me, and I want to talk about those notes that Roger sent me and kind of go through what's different in the rule book. And for those of you that have and or remember the original rule book, kind of talk about what's changed, and for the new people, kind of highlight some of the things that if you've never used the original rule book or later on down the road in this next printing that he's doing, or you're getting the new the reprint, it's going to have the revised rule book in it. Kind of some of the things that I want to highlight so that you make sure that you know are in there that I think are definitely improvements to the game, because there have been some entire modes that have been introduced that did not exist in the original game. So let me get my notes up here. Awesome. So first thing to point out, what is the point of this? What was the point of this rule book? It was the revised rule book, and some of the things that we're going to talk about later was reduced game time. You guys watched the playthrough. I was using the solo mode rules, which is not in the classic system. The classic system was 6 heroes, all gear, all abilities, all played at the same time. And it was a lot, right? That's managing 6 people with unique talents, abilities, unique gear. Not easy to do. Super fun, and with the whole party building aspect, and like making sure that like if you split them up and these guys go over here and then these guys go over here, that you got your party stacked. Well, maybe not stacked, maybe stacked, but where you're all helping each other out. That's super fun, super awesome. But there's a lot involved in that to keep track of, and if there's not a couple of you playing, it can get very difficult. So this revised combat adds some things in that are going to significantly reduce that game time. Now, having said that, this rule book doesn't cut out the original rules. Really, most of the rule book is how to play the game, because the revised combat system and solo mode and all those sorts of things really aren't changing the way the game is played. They're just making it simpler mechanically in a couple of respects, fewer things to track, fewer people to track, and as a result, a lot of the time that you spent like doing combat and calculations, things of that nature, there's a lot of things that it just cuts down time on. And so the net effect is you have a quicker game, which is awesome because that means you can play it more often. And especially if you got new people, they don't like have deers in the headlights look when you tell them this game could take, to go through all 3 quest tables. Like this weekend, we're going to play Dungeon Crusade, and they're like, that's the only thing we're playing. You know, it's going to take you you're not going to get through with this in an hour. But you know, if everybody's doing what they're doing and knowing what they're playing, you could play at a brisk pace. Obviously, my playthrough is a lot of me explaining what I'm going to do, right, and talking through things. But if you're playing by yourself and you just make decisions, you move your guy, you roll your dice, bing, bang, boom, much quicker than it is in my playthrough. But hopefully my playthrough will give you a good example of what can happen and show you a lot of the mechanics. If you haven't watched that, definitely go check that out. So, excuse me, it is meant to reduce game time. Make sure you understand this does not replace the classic system. The classic system is still in there. If you want to use the original rule set, hey, go for it. I would say maybe even start out in solo mode, and then once you get really comfortable with the game, if you want more of a deeper combat system, and you want to have like more heroes to really explore the heroes, or to explore the abilities and the combinations of things you can do, and kind of more of that party building feel, where instead of like in solo mode, where you have up to 3 people, your hero, and up to 2 mercenaries, you know, you have 2 separate parties of kind of maybe 3 3 heroes each, or maybe you've got 3 parties of 2 people, and you're kind of dividing and conquering and all that. You can certainly do that with the original mode. The classic mode is what it's called in the rule book, or you can use some of the revised systems that we're going to talk about. It is easier and quicker to set up. So one of the things that the original rulebook was missing was kind of like, it walks you through the setup, but it didn't really show you the setup as well as it could have. In this, the beginning of the rulebook, it's going to show you the setup. It's going to show you the graphic and kind of show you how things were laid out, so you have a better idea. The Avalon Adventure board game, it's in there. It is compatible. The rule set is compatible. So if you remember in the original game, you can start with the Avalon Adventure board game. You play through that, and you're going to get gold. You're going to get items. You're going to get loot. You're going to get things of that nature. And you can, instead of just kind of starting off with a variable setup and random amount of gold and purchasing stuff, you can actually start the game with... What are you doing, little boy? What are you doing? That's my dog. He's looking at me like, what are you doing? Yep, there he goes. Told you. You can start off with that stuff from the Avalon Adventure board game. Yeah, so you can start out with that from the Avalon Adventure board game. So that's awesome. But what this does is it makes all that setup easier. It makes it quicker. You have a visual, so you can see what happens with that. The other thing, the big thing that, now this is one thing where I don't know how you fix this at this point, but one of the things that when the game came out is you had all these tiles, but you didn't have any sort of map that told you like how the tiles were supposed to fit together. So you had to kind of like play Tetris. And so you found the paths and lined them up right. There was no numbers like Zombicide. You know, you've got tiles that have numbers, and there's a diagram that says this tile goes here, this tile goes here, this tile goes here, et cetera, and then it shows you where to place stuff. Well, now on the back of the book, all four dungeons, 2 that come with the base game, and then the 2 that are expansion dungeons, are shown with their setup, including the chambers, including mining, including treasure spots. All that stuff's there. So it's much easier for you to find all those places because some of the boards, like the art is beautiful. Like I love the art in the game, but when you're having to search for like the little skull icon for the traps, for example, there's more than once where I missed on a tile a trap because there's just so many the art. There's just so much art, which is awesome. But there is a lot of art. All right, cool. So that takes care of that part. Next thing to talk about is the scalable reference card, scalable ability reference card. What does he call it? Yeah, scalable difficulty reference card. So Dungeon Crusade is not an easy game. It's brutal, and so when you set up the game, as you remember, if you watch the playthrough, you have these environment cards and event cards. And a lot of times there's a test involved. Well, when you look at those tests, a lot of those tests are like on a 15 plus, 16 plus. Like the numbers are fairly high. So it's a tough game if you play like straight up classic. So what he has done is he's taken and he's created a scalable reference card. And basically what this does is it gives you, based on your level 1, 2, or 3, it gives you a, I guess depending on how you look at it, either a bonus or a debuff to all of the difficulty checks. So anytime you make a test, let's say you're level 1 and the number says you got to roll 16. Well, at level 1, I think it's like a -6, -4, or minus 6, -3, and then -0. But you get a reduction in that. So your 16 now becomes at level 1 a 10, which is still 50-50. But you're going to have a couple of points for bonus, so it makes it much easier because it really was a tough game. Now, for some people, if you like tough games, that was awesome. No problem there. But if you got some bad rolls early on, especially, and you just you kept dying, or you're doing a test, one of the cards is, I don't remember the name of the card. What was it? Anyway, yeah, I don't remember the name. So it actually takes, and your hero is kind of like kidnapped for a turn, and you have to make a strength check to get out. Well, like if the strength check is 16 and you're a mage, that's physical warfare. You're getting a -2 to your roll. At level 1, you really got to roll like an 18 plus to get out. And that's multiple turns where if you just roll real bad, it's going to be really tough to get out. So that scalable reference card really, really helps with that. Hey, Roger, I believe I've talked about it already in this video. It's been a while since I made it, so maybe I haven't. But Roger is all about play the game the way that you want to play it. It's have fun. He wants to see people experiment. So if you're playing and you feel like you're feeling defeated and you're like, man, I still can't seem to roll well. If let's say it's -6, -6 is not enough at level 1, make it make them easier. Instead of giving yourself a +6 to your roll, give yourself a +8. And if you find it's getting really, really easy as you start to get gear, drop it back down to a 6. If you find it super easy, drop it down to a 4. Cut the numbers in half on the reference card. Perfectly fine. That's Roger just wants you to have fun, and that is his passion. He made a unique game with a lot of cool things in it. He wants you to have fun. He wants you to try the different ways to do the game. I mean, a lot of the stuff that he's done with some tokens, like the tokens that he's done. He saw that in my video where I was using some colored chips to denote like the chambers and what quests they went with, so it was easier to look and see instead of having to constantly read the card and be like, okay, the King's Chamber, and let me look and see where that's on the board, and then 3 turns later, wait, where am I headed? The King's Chamber. Where was that again? He saw that and he was like, oh, so now he's got these skeleton tokens that look amazing. That you're going to be able to get that you can use to track stuff. So he's definitely always trying to improve. This was an example of players saying, this game's awesome, this game is tough, and
there's always, you can house rule stuff, but it's always nice when the creator kind of steps in and gives you that option to do something different. Probably the biggest thing that he's added is the solo crusader mode. Mechanically, it's pretty much just like playing classic Dungeon Crusade, but instead of having 6 heroes, you start out with 1. And you can hire mercenaries. So you can hire up to 2 other mercenaries, which effectively act just like heroes. Now, it's going to cost you some gold to hire them, and you have a mercenary camp that is going to rotate people out every time you complete a quest table. So, like, if you get somebody and you're playing and they're just not, you either want to experience something different, or you got a lot of gear and you got a lot of duplication maybe of some warfare type, and somebody comes out on that mercenary camp that's going to kind of fill a hole where you got really good in this warfare type X and you really need some Y, and they happen to have Y, then you can switch them out. You can spend that gold to do that. Or you can play straight up solo crusader. One of the biggest things about the solo crusader mode is it does also change. It does use a different combat, and I'll talk about the combat in a minute, but it greatly simplifies combat. You're not doing 3 different sets of rolls. In the classic game, you could only use 1 weapon unless you happen to have 2 weapons and you had to defend. So there's like 3 sets of rolls and comparisons. And this, there's 1 set of roll. Well, there's 1 roll that basically has the equivalent of 2 attacks in it. But they're really simple. You can reuse the same weapon, so you don't have to worry about like finding multiple weapons in solo mode, because you don't have to use like multiple weapons unless you've got one that's better in a warfare type or something like that. You can sell your stuff, which means you can buy better stuff, which I did enjoy that, I'll be honest. You're going to get the same amount of gold with a bunch of characters with 6 people as you are with 3 people, or really even 1 person, because if you kill something, you roll, other than Albus having to like maybe run between you to get the gold like gathered up, you get the same amount of gold. And it's nice to just kind of like, I enjoyed that I could kind of power level a single hero and then have the other guys just kind of there to help do some things. I enjoyed that aspect of it. So that's kind of what solo crusader mode gives you. It gives you that ability to experience kind of like better, more gear and stuff like that with the solo, and it cuts down the combat, what we call evolved minion combat, which we'll talk about a little bit later. One of the other things that he's added as an option is the minion movement speed track. So all minions in the base game, if you look at their card, they have a basic movement and then a type of die. So it's usually a D6, and then they have some sort of additional movement. Well, with this minion movement speed track, I did not use that in my playthrough, by the way. But you can actually either say, okay, let's make it variable. So you can roll a die and you can say, okay, on this turn, the base is D4 for everybody. You might roll and the base is a D12 for everybody. So everybody moves much quicker or everybody moves much slower. Or you can do it on a monster by monster basis. You can roll for each monster and say, okay, this turn, their base is a D4, and then we're adding their movement, right? And you can, so that really what that does is that really makes the minion movement super dynamic. Now, Guardians don't get changed. Obviously, chamber combat is in a chamber, so they're not moving around. But minions, it really makes it dynamic, because you never know, right, how they're going to move. One of the nice things that I like about the basic minion movement is you have a pretty good idea. So especially if you get one that's raiding and they start getting close to the siege tile, you kind of know, I've got about X turns before they get there. But I mean, it's kind of fun too to not know, because you're really taking more of a risk, right? So if you want a more of a risk reward kind of situation, you could risk it and say, okay, they've got a D6 plus 5. Within 2-ish turns, maybe they'll get there and roll, and you might roll a D4 twice, so they're moving really slow, or you may roll and they're moving with a D12, or something crazy and really getting there faster than you can, and so then you got to change your plan. So I think that's pretty cool. The evolved minion combat is a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that because one of the things that I didn't necessarily enjoy about the base game was that you could only use a weapon to attack once. So let's say in the base game I've got a single weapon, and that's all I've been able to find because I found armor or haven't been able to kill a minion, or I've killed minions, or my treasure hasn't given me any loot that I can use, or for something of that nature. Well, in the original one, if I only had a single weapon, when I did my attacks, I got to attack once, then I had to defend twice. It's no fun. In my mind, thematically, well, I won't say it's no fun. That's not fair. It wasn't fun for me. In my mind, thematically, I'm like, if there's 3 phases and we're clearly attacking 3 times with 3 different points where we can take damage, why can't I swing my sword 3 times? Why can't I use my staff 3 times? The warfare types don't change. I'm only going to get a bonus with 1, but why don't I have the opportunity to, even if it's a lesser opportunity, an opportunity to do damage to what I'm fighting? Well, Evolved Minion fixes that. Evolved Minion says you pick a weapon, right? You randomly select 1 warfare type, so now you're not having to compare like all your gear to 3 different things, 3 different warfares values. You're just comparing it to 1, and you have a D20 that's what they call what he calls the final strike die, which essentially is a second attack, but it's a D20. So to me it was cool because it was like when I'm fighting a minion, I'm either I can be really good at it, or maybe I'm not. But what it did force me to do is it forced me to look at all of my gear, right? Not just my weapon. I really had to look and say, okay, like I've got this piece of gear that would give me amazing for ranged, but if I didn't have another mercenary or they didn't have that kind of gear, you know what I'm saying? You kind of like balance that out. And if you don't want to deal with other mercenaries, you just do it yourself. It's a little bit harder, probably, I would imagine. I did it with 2 people instead of the 3, and I didn't change my person. But, you can do true solo and really, really experience it, I think, in a really fun way. But if you like the party building aspect, you have plenty of opportunity to do that. So the evolved combat really speeds things up because now I'm not comparing 3 warfare values. I'm not trying to figure out what I rolled on 3 sets of die. I'm not having to roll 3 sets of die to begin with. All that goes much quicker. Now, the other thing evolved combat does do is when you're talking about combat at the with rallying, so you can't rally another hero. Excuse me. You can't rally another hero when you're talking about minion combat to help you fight. So there are some modifications, which really getting rid of that kind of speeds it up too, because now I don't have 2 sets of people to be like, okay, he's got this weapon and this armor and these trinkets and this necklace, and his total for this warfare is X and this one is Y. So don't want to use him or don't want to use him. Like, I don't have to do all those calculations twice. He's got a ton of Kickstarter updates, and he's got a bunch of video series. His Kickstarter updates are very detailed, and because he's passionate about the project, so he will explain all the new stuff coming up in detail to you. Good Lord. So definitely, if you're getting the game or you got the game, check that out. But yeah, this rulebook section, man, I'm telling you, it is it's so much better than it was before. That's a ton of time on the rulebook, but at the same time, I think it's worth it because really, that's where you're gonna learn to play the game, and that was for me the largest stumbling block. Everything else about the game was awesome. The components were good. It was fun. It was tons of lore, all that sort of stuff. But the rulebook is what really, for me, um, was the biggest hurdle in the game, and I think it was going to be the biggest hurdle for most of the people playing. I felt like that we're not. That's hard. Yeah, I'm gonna need that. Whew, much better. So that was the biggest hurdle for most people, I think, that were coming into the game, and this rule book fixes that. Um, there's still the way things are phrased. Sometimes there's a few concepts that, um, like like helping people to easily understand what like the player turn is and like the actions, because the way some cards are written, you're like some of the stuff will say like once per turn. Well, like, does that mean you've got so many actions, right? So does once per turn mean do I do that on my, like, how many ever many actions is really what I get to do? Is that my whole turn with each set of actions? Yeah, so that was kind of confusing, but watch some playthroughs. Watch mine, hopefully. I screwed a couple things up at the beginning, but around episode 7 or 8, I corrected most of that. And so that's a lot of time on the rule book, but that was the biggest sticking point. So I really wanted to hammer that. And there you go. That's what I think about the rule book. And this is at the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for subscribing. This is not at the end of the video. You will see the much less hairy me continue on with my thoughts on Dungeon Crusade. In either case, thank you guys for watching and subscribing. I'll see you in the next section and or video. Bye, guys.
I'm not going to say fiddly. It's not necessarily that the rules were difficult for how you do what you do. It's just there's a lot going on. But which was fine. I mean, it was designed that way, right? He intentionally said he wanted to build a game that was different, that was party building based, that you needed to have groups of people together to make it work. I mean, it's just like the classic D&D. That's what his vision was, and I think he executed that vision definitely in the game. But he did release later on the solo crusader mode, which basically has you play as a main hero, and then you have mercenaries, which act just like any other hero, except that you have to kind of retain them, so you pay gold in between quest tables, and each time you go to town, so you complete your quest, you go to town, and then like there's new ones that populate, so you can kind of like switch them out, right? Switch the heroes out, so you could try other heroes, or like in my playthrough that I did, I picked my hero, I hired my mercenary, and I kept that mercenary for the entirety of the playthrough. But you could switch them out at any time, the ones that were available for that quest chapter. So I did like that. Also, there's a scalable reference card. So basically, the core game is extremely, it's very tough. And there's actually, so the monsters in here. Yeah, there's actually, so you have these packs, and you have these monsters, right, that are this, you can get these upgrade packs, and the monsters there's like 3 levels. They go from like the basic level, and there's 2 more additional harder levels. So you can make the game harder that way, but the checks and stuff on the monsters were not very forgiving. A lot of those check thresholds were pretty high. So at lower levels, at lower level, when you've got like a +2 or maybe a +3 to something, and you got to roll like a 16 plus on a d20, a lot of times you fail. And usually failing those penalties was pretty harsh, especially in the earlier levels. But he did come out with a scalable reference card. So basically, what it does is each quest table, right? Each level that you are, level 1, 2, or 3, with 3 being the highest, 1 being where you start. It makes all the checks for abilities and traps and stuff like that, subtracts some number from the difficulty, so it makes it easier for you to do. So, like, for example, I believe it's minus at level 1, it's -6. So if I've got a card that says, "Oh, I need a 16," or I need a, yes, like let's say a 16 to get a check. Well, now it's actually a 10. And so it's still a 50-50 shot, right? It's not like you're going to run away with it. And your stat may help a little bit, but depending on what the check is, your stat may be garbage for that check, because that's just not the way your hero's geared. You don't have gear that helps you with that. Their class doesn't help you with that. So, I mean, it made it. I didn't play that way in my playthrough until towards the end, about the second quest table. But it does make it a lot more enjoyable, I think. And I think it makes it where the difficulty's still there, by like completely the difficulty's there, but it makes it more doable, in which to me that made it a lot more fun as far as playing, because constantly failing every check and taking damage and losing essence. If you don't win sometime, it really it makes you not want to play. And this game is I don't say it doesn't make you want to play. It makes it kind of depressing because you just get tired of losing over it. Now, if you're one of those people, like, you're all about losing and it just drives you, then hey, that mechanic might work for you. Evolved minions, that's another variant. So the way combat works in the original game is pretty much the same for everything, whether it's a minion or a champion, which is in the chambers, or guardian, where you have 3 rounds or you have a round where you're rolling against all the different warfare types. The evolved minions, basically, it helps you get through those. And minions, you think of minions kind of like as trash mobs. Lets you get through those quicker, because you're just basically doing one warfare check, and you roll a warfare roll, and you roll a d20, and it's kind of like you attack twice against a single stat, so it makes it quicker. Now, what it does also do, though, is if you're not very good at what you happen to roll, you're potentially taking twice as much damage. So, but I did use the evolved minions in the playthrough, and I enjoyed it. I would probably continue to play through that, because it's just the minions. When you do chamber combat and you fight guardians, it's just like the standard classic rules. So I like the classic rules a lot, but it did make the game go quicker. So that was cool. A con that I have, and I've kind of touched on a little bit, is just that, well, I guess I say a con, I guess this didn't necessarily bother me, but I can see this as a con for a lot of people. If you play with the classic rules, it is a very long game. And you saw how many hours it was that I did to do from start to finish. It's not something you just sit down and in a couple hours you're done. I don't know how anybody could do that, especially if you played with the classic rules where you got 6 heroes and you're trying to keep up with what's going on. Another con is, so earlier I talked about the theme of the and art and the lore. That was a pro. The con here with the art is that it's not always clear. So, for example, if I'm looking at the board that I played on in my playthrough, when you're looking at the patrol routes, there's sometimes it'll go around like some sort of tree or bush. And I say tree or bush because there's really, other than walls, there's no sort of marking that tells you in a space whether that's an obstacle, like something you pass through or not. Now, some of the art's obvious. Some rooms there's a pillar. It's a pillar in the room. I know that I can't go through that. It's not marked, but I assume I can't go through that. But there's some art, like especially the trees and the shrubs, that I had to make a decision because it's not marked clearly, and the rule book just says it gives you examples of things you can't pass through, but there's nothing on the boards that tell you, like for example in Madara, if there's a space that's impassable or something like that, there is a outline around that space. All right, the art's there, but there's definitely an outline, and you don't have to worry try to interpret the art to determine whether that space is passable or not passable, whether it blocks line of sight or doesn't block line of sight, etc., etc. And some of the art I found, especially the tree and shrub type art, I wasn't sure. The only thing that gave me a clue was that the patrol route did not go through it, but that could have just been because it was a little bit longer and passed through a couple more rooms, as opposed to that was a tree instead of a bush. So there was some things that was hard to tell on. The last from the pro con list is a con. This baby is massive. I mean, this table that I'm sitting at now is a 54 by 54, and it basically took up the entirety of the table. That's number one. Number two, you got to remember, I was only playing with 2 out of potentially 6 heroes. So there was no way. And the only reason I was able to play at this table is because of the solo crusader mode, because I didn't have to have a ton of heroes. The boards are huge. The UI boards are huge. There's a ton of decks, and so like I was using a little stand to like stack the cards up. If I had to just lay them out there, there's no way. I mean, you would have to have if you go to Guru Skin's Unlimited channel and you look at what he's done, he has this like 7 foot by like 4 foot board. It's massive. He has to basically build a board for the game. So the con is that it's a table hog. This is not something that you just set up and then take down, especially with what you got to set up that you got to go through to see the dungeon. And then, because when you set it up, you see the dungeon, and then there's some generic stuff you do for the dungeon, and then each quest has this whole thing you go through set up where you're seeding different monsters and items for the quest into these rooms. I mean, it probably took me let's say it can take you anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how you have your stuff. Like, I've got a lot of stuff in this box, and then I've got 3 separate of these boxes that have like these are my player boards. This box is like tokens for monsters, raiding tokens, mystery tokens, trap tokens, warfare tokens, money, damage markers, stuff like that. This box is just a whole bunch of quest tokens that are separated, just makes it quicker to find when I'm doing the quest table setup. And this is nothing but standees, right, for all the minions in the different colors. Doors, heroes, that sort of thing. So there is a lot that goes on, and so there's a ton of things that you got to put out there, and it takes up a ton of space. And that's negative because a lot of people are not going to have the space that's needed for this. Or if they do, they're not going to have an alternative place to play, a good alternative place to play other stuff. And so they have to leave this out. And if you're not doing like a long weekend, like, or you're just doing a marathon, it's going to be rough. So that's kind of my list of pros and cons. So let me just kind of like draw back here and give you kind of my final thoughts about the game. I like dungeon crawls. Dungeon crawls are one of my favorite, if not maybe my favorite type of game. I like a lot of different games, obviously, but those I really, really enjoy. I don't get to play them as much as I like because a lot of times, even games that don't have this kind of setup, you got all those minis and you have to store all that, and then you always have to kind of find them and pull them out, minis or standees or whatever. But I do love dungeon crawls. It's probably one of my favorite things. Excuse me. This game is checking all the boxes. I mean, if you like dungeon crawls and you don't mind the setup and you don't mind the time that you invest in that, this is probably one of the most amazing dungeon crawls out there, hands down. Thematically, awesome. Mechanically, once you know the rules, I mean, it just the way that things are done is really, really neat. I really, really enjoy this game. Um, I mean, I wouldn't have spent the amount of time that I spent on this game on the channel doing that many episodes if I didn't love it. So I think this game is amazing. Does it have some issues? Yeah, it's got a couple issues, but most of those issues, once you learn the rules through whatever method you learn the rules, watching the video, reading back through the rulebook multiple times, and the community that's out there is willing to help, then this game is amazing. I like for me, the style of art was great. It's not the most amazing thing, but again, when you look at what he was trying to do, what Roger was trying to do with this game, I mean, it's exactly what he was trying to do. His thought process, the image, what he created in his mind's eye. This game nailed it, and I really, 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 really enjoy it. I think it's worth getting if you can get it. Once you get past the learning curve, right? So I think there's a little bit of a learning curve, obviously with the rule book, but once you get the rules down, man, this dungeon crawl is amazing. It's one that I wish I could play more, but I don't have the space. And obviously I've got a lot of other games that I need to play too, and not just this one. But yeah, I would highly recommend this. And like I said, I had some cons with the rule book, and I gave some examples of some not so helpful things, but by and large, there's a community out there that's willing to help you, that's willing to explain things to you, and that helped tremendously. So there's the Facebook group that you can join. Go check it out. Follow Grievous Games. He's put out a ton of videos. He's constantly putting out videos about the game, different aspects, anything he's working on. And check this game out. I think you'll like it. If you have the same kind of taste that I do, if the stuff you've seen on this channel is something that you enjoyed, then I think you'll really, really like it. And I would highly recommend it. And so thank you, Roger, for creating this game. I know it took a long time to get it from his brain and his vision to actual production. But man, you knocked it out of the park as far as just on the merits of the game. It's amazing. And I think that's everything I have to say about that. I did enjoy doing the playthrough. So if you haven't seen the playthrough, definitely go check that playthrough out. I will tell you that I believe it's 40 episodes long. So, it's the entire playthrough. I don't believe, at least that I've been able to found as of this moment, I don't believe that I found anywhere else on any platform that has a complete playthrough from start to finish of this game. There's a lot of stuff. There's some things, and even on Grievous Games YouTube channel, that he does like a quest table, but he never goes all the way through and does all three from start to finish. But man, it was so worth it. Again, not something I would do like back to back to back, but I would do it again. I would like to do. This is one of those things. It's kind of like TI, Thought Imperium. It's something you want to do. You don't do it often, but a couple times a year you pull it out and you're just like, man, this game is so amazing. Why don't I play it more? And then you set it up, and then you have to take it all apart and get everything sorted, and you're like, okay, I remember now. But yeah, so that is my review of Dungeon Crusade from Grievous Games Unlimited, Book 1, A Genesis of Evil. So there are additional books. The idea is that they're going to publish additional books in this universe, in this series. So I'm looking forward to that. So check that out. Follow Grievous Games and see what he's got going on. I think that's it for me. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for subscribing. Y'all have a great time. Go play some games. Go have some real fun out there with cardboard. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.